Not a millennial? Keep scrolling. The old people in the room need to have a chat.
In all seriousness, there is a changing of the guard happening in ministry right now.
And if you're a millennial and you're not careful, you are doomed to make the same mistakes the previous generation did.
Let's dive in.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tool Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. Regrettably, it is the millennial minister, Alexander Mills.
Hello.
Believe it or not, I was doing the prep for the show this morning, and this all started exactly a year ago today.
Wow.
We have touched on the topic we are about to dive deep into in so many different episodes over the past year. So much so that when I sat down to prep pods this week, I was like, you know what? We need to dedicate an entire episode to this. A year ago today, I published a reel on Instagram with the title, Scary New Design Trend. It was scary. That video has now about 20,000 likes, 350,000 views, one of our better performing posts over the last year. The purpose of that video was to highlight a new stock photo site that had come across my feed called dupephotos.com. The site has a tagline that reads, relevant, royalty-free imagery. The key word being relevant.
Yeah.
The entire purpose of this stock photo site that was built and first came across my feed through the influence of a person from Gen Z was, hey, the previous era's stock photo sites are not at all authentic or genuine to what imagery should look like. And so if you want stuff that doesn't look contrived, this is the stock photo site for you. It's relevant, implying that the previous stock photo sites were irrelevant. It was clear to me at that moment what was happening because we went through the exact same thing when we as millennials, me at age 34, Alex at age 32, came of age. We had this new stock photo site called Unsplash because the previous era of stock photo sites, iStockPhoto.net, let's say.
Getty Images.
Right, was all really glossy. You would have like these sets that were obviously prepared. People were setting up studio lights.
Lit from everywhere.
Yeah. High key lighting, perfect like a sitcom. Everyone was having their makeup done. And we were like, man, this doesn't look at all like the real world. And that was what inspired and influenced Unsplash.com, which was like, our images were gonna look cinematic. So you would take a photo, no makeup, no fancy lights, and then you'd bring it into Lightroom. And you would like make color adjustments and you'd add a little vignette and you would do all of these things to make it look great, but without it feeling like it was this big production. The great irony is that what we considered genuine and authentic, relevant even, to the previous irrelevant era of stock photo imagery, now that's been flipped and Gen Z is saying the way to make stock imagery relevant is to just take a picture with your phone. No editing in post. Editing in post is genuine. Is not genuine. Adding vignettes, a color profile. And we're going to show on the screen right now 2 different photos of a waterfall. The first photo is our waterfall. This is the millennial waterfall.
It's the Unsplash waterfall.
And it looks great to me. It has a vignette.
Yes.
The saturation and the contrast is great. There's a color profile. Clearly, they are highlighting certain colors in the photo that are there. They're desaturating other ones to bring together this cinematic type image. And now you can see the Gen Z waterfall. To my eyes, this looks worse.
Yes.
It's just a phone photo, which to me is like, that doesn't look nearly as good. But to the eyes of Gen Z, it is relevant.
And you know, the disparity between the generations here is really contrasted by the fact that both of these photos evoke feelings. So that first photo of the waterfall, that feels authentic to me. It feels beautiful to me. I'll out myself. I use Unsplash every single week. I still do. And that second photo of the waterfall has no feeling to me. But Gen Z, the generation that's coming up behind us, is saying something completely different. They're saying that Unsplash photo, that really curated image, although it's not lit with studio lighting, it feels, it feels curated. It feels set up. But these iPhone photos, they feel true, they feel genuine, they feel authentic, they feel in the moment. You'll see that if you go to dupephotos.com. Those photos are all just taken with iPhones or with mobile phones. And that's what Gen Z is saying is this is what feels, to use the tagline from Dupe Photos, this is what feels relevant to us. And so just based off those feelings, what those photos make us feel comparatively to somebody else younger than us, you really see the generational divide there in that contrast.
And this is really the crux of what we want to talk about in this episode. When you can look at 2 different images and one age group can say, that's genuine, and this is not. And then the generation that comes after them
Yeah.
says the exact opposite.
Yes.
We're not talking here about like missional differences. We're not talking here about like different interpretations of scripture. We're talking about creative culture. And this kind of leads into big idea number 1 for this episode. We've got 5 big ideas. Big idea number 1 is that there are 2 types of culture. There's creative culture and then there's capitalist culture. Creative culture would be things that include fashion, music, aesthetic, internet trends, slang. This is the culture that for our duration of existence as millennials, we have been driving the trends with. We have been the ones that have been going to our senior leaders and saying, hey, this is a creative project that we'd like to do. Yeah. And our senior leaders have been like, well, we've always done it this way. And what you're proposing is a little bit strange. And to us, we've always been like, what do you mean strange? Like, this makes so much sense. This is like, how can you not see it? This is clear as day.
Yeah.
And then there's capitalist culture. And capitalist culture really includes anything that's like bought and sold by big business. So like think about commercials, think about feature films, restaurants. And what we have seen happen to us as millennials is we have graduated from being the key influencers of creative culture. And now we are the key target audience, the recipients of capitalist culture.
Right.
And I can see this clearly because when I remember my time in my teens and my 20s, I would like go to restaurants or I would see commercials. No one would be my age in a commercial.
Right.
No one who was like a big movie star was my age. Films would have like even music drops. And I'd be like, my mom would be like, oh, great. That's this artist. I'm like, I don't know who that artist is. Like, I know that song because like it's a classic song. I don't remember when it came out. And now like they'll have like a needle drop in a movie and I'll be like, oh, I remember when that song like came out.
Yes.
And we now in our chief primary buying years as 30-somethings with kids and mortgages and husbands and wives, we are now the recipients and the target audience for like commercials. I'm like, oh, that guy's my age. Wait, he needs a prescription for what? And then I'll look at like the trends in fashion. I'm like, man, those pants are really baggy. That seems strange. I'll meet with like a lead pastor of a church and then they'll like walk away. Like when we meet for lunch, they walk away like, well, those are some skinny pants on a 40-year-old. Like, oh, right. Because like that's how old we are right now. And the difference between the two is really buying power.
Sure.
Because when you're younger, you don't have the ability with your income to buy things that the capitalist culture wants to sell you. And so they're not really targeting to you. So what do? We influence things that have no money related to them whatsoever. We can influence slang. These are the words that we use now. You use those words? We don't use those words anymore. We use these words. How are you able to make that decision? Because
it's free.
Yeah, and we're young, and young is cool, and old is not. You're old, we're young, we decide. The big idea here is like, okay, millennials, we need to understand that this transition is happening. Let's be honest, it's already taken place, but like it has become so stark and obvious to me that we have gone from this previous era where we were to this new era where we are now, and there are, of course, dangers that come from that.
And this is evergreen, right? It's not unique to our generation. This
Gen Z screwed, just so they know. Like it's
this handover of creative influence, creative power has always existed. I wonder, because you and I are kind of in the middle of the millennial generation. We're not on the elder end or the complete opposite on the youngest end. We're not on either border. But we are just kind of entering into our mid-30s. I wonder if that line of delineation, that 30-year-old mark, has always been kind of the precipice of this handing over of the proverbial baton, or if it's just when we're experiencing it. But surely it's something you and I at this age have been feeling, in the last handful of years. But now we can just see like, oh yeah, we are getting our fashion information from folks who are younger than us, who are telling us what's cool and what's not. I'm getting chastised in my kitchen last week for using certain phrases by my 15-year-old nephew because, Uncle Al, we don't use those anymore. So we've been feeling it kind of philosophically or perceiving it philosophically for some time, but now certainly feeling it experientially.
And it's a very strange feeling. It's disorienting.
Yes.
Because when you're young, you don't think consciously like, oh, we're driving creative culture.
Right.
Because it's all you've known. And so it's like, yeah, like this is the music that I like, and the music that I like is on the charts.
Yeah.
And then you get older, you're like, the music that I like is not on the charts. Oh. So there was a moment in time where my generation was driving creative culture. We've exited that moment, and now we're the targets of like prescription drug commercials.
Yeah, and interest rates.
That's fascinating. Yeah, like, oh, all these things that I would remember hearing and being like, man, that's just like going way over my head. Like,
okay,
I
Dad.
understand those words.
Yes.
Like, oh, that's acronym means this. I'm aware of that. Very strange. And this leads into big idea number 2, which is that we all have to come to terms as millennials with this fact. Okay, you're no longer driving creative trends. What that does mean, though, is we are responsible for responding to trends. And how this intersects with what we talk about on this show specifically is that digital ministry and creative ministry exists almost completely within the realm of creative culture.
Right.
So, if you are a lead pastor and you're responsible for, pastoral care and preaching and leading a team, like there are some things that we're talking about today that will intersect there. But if you're in the day-to-day of like creating graphics and using photography and videography and writing captions and copywriting, like that's right in the overlap of creative culture. And so you can like look around and suddenly be like, man, what they're calling good design now sure feels like nasty to me. And that is something that is really tricky to come to terms with. The key here, though, is to not repeat the mistakes that the generation before us sometimes fell into. And to be clear, our generation will repeat these mistakes exactly. But if you're listening to this, my call to you is, hey, don't become the creative leader or the senior leader in church that when younger people come to you and propose things, you slough it off because you're like, why would we do that? Like, that's not how we've done it before. We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
And you're kind of still living in that era where you are kind of like the tastemaker because we're not the tastemakers anymore. The reality of that means we're probably going to be like, we might brisk at what is considered taste now because it should be uncomfortable to us. Creative culture shifts, and the shift is almost always in the other direction from what was popular before, meaning you're almost certainly going to feel a certain type of way that's not positive about what is now on trend.
Yeah, I just read this phrase this week in a book I'm reading that it's very simple that says, what goes unnamed often goes unnoticed. And so for folks who are listening to this show, who are serving their churches in this way, at least listening to this conversation between you and I today, hopefully will serve to name this generational evolution so that you can notice it within yourself and within your team so that you don't end up being the prickly pastor who's just like, yeah, like we've never done it that way before. And that puts the finger right on the heart of this entire conversation, which is the motivation for naming this at all, which is not for vanity, not so that you are wearing what's always in style, or not so that you're just using the vernacular that the kids are using, because oftentimes that comes across as quite cringe. But no, there's a missional value to this, which is we want to name this and be aware of it so that we can reach people online with this eternal truth, this story, this gospel message of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and when we get to big idea 4 and 5, we're going to get into specific values that you can keep top of mind to help you navigate this. We'll get into the mission behind it. Big idea number 3, we just briefly touched on. Millennials are about to repeat the mistakes we chastised our senior leaders for a decade ago, but we'll make excuses for it this time, is what I want to start with, because that feeling is still fresh in our mind. We are still young enough to remember what it was like to like propose something and then be like, 1, that doesn't belong in church, or 2, that expression needs to be dramatically changed if you want to even bring it into church. Yeah. Like, we know what that was like. We are going to repeat those same mistakes, but when we're confronted by it, we'll say to ourselves, well, this time it's different.
Right.
But all that will have happened is that we'll have gained fresh perspective on what it's like to now span multiple eras, when previously we only knew what it was like to be in the one era.
Yeah.
This is another example of this. I was talking with a pastor, and he was roughly our age. We were talking about these same ideas. And he told me, he's like, you know what's coming back? And I was like, what? He's like, plants on stage at church. And I thought to myself, that is perhaps the very best example I can even think about. Like,
I devoted my first 5 years of serving in church to getting all of the plants off the stage. I knew I couldn't do it all at once because there were so many. So it took me about 5 years to get them all off. You're telling me I got to put them back?
There are certain trends that are so extreme that we push back against them in equally extreme ways.
Yeah.
This is why, like, skinny jeans, like skin-tight jeans, it's hard to imagine them coming back within like 10, 15, 20 years.
Because we're in a wide leg era.
No, because they were so intense
right.
that everyone was like, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
I think I equate skinny jeans to when I would be in high school and I would walk up to like the previous graduation classes, like in the 80s and the 90s, and I'd see these insane mullets.
Right, what were they doing?
Why did everyone have this one hairstyle, and how did it get so extreme? Usually trends are like inoffensive,
Sure.
but every so often we have a trend that is so extreme that the pushback against it is equally extreme.
Yeah.
And that was plants on stage. Every single church had a stage covered in plants. And we were like, what is this?
Yeah.
Why are these fake plants everywhere? This is gross. And then we went the exact opposite way. We removed them entirely. It's now been like 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
And now Gen Z is looking at our decor and they're like, why is everything millennial gray?
Can we get some life in here?
Like,
Have
you
you
guys-
seen this church? Eden Church in Houston. If you look them up on Instagram, Eden Church Houston, it's literally in a garden. They're like, plants? How about we did nothing but plants? Except I think some of those are real. That's pretty, the aesthetic there is pretty nice.
And that's the point. When you're aware of the fact that you are so impressionable,
Yeah.
you're able to like approach a trend that you used to hate with a sober mind and go, okay, surely there's a version of this that is cringe.
Yeah.
It's not like Gen Z uncovered like the right way of doing things and everything they do turns to gold, but they are seeing something that we were closed off to.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about changing generations, because one generation will say, we care about this, this, and this. By nature, that means you're neglecting this, this, and that. And then the next generation will come and say, hey, you know that thing you neglected? There's actually something cool about it. And here's this expression of it that you actually didn't know existed, and it's really awesome.
Right.
And so you're like, wow, that's a great version of that. Sounds like maybe I came into this when I was really only exposed to the counterfeit version, which is kind of gross. But this version is actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you have to look inward and go, oh, is everything I believed a lie? And I think that's what's so disorienting about this, because it really causes you to look internally and be like, oh my goodness, if I believed that, does that mean I should also not believe this? And it's much easier for us as leaders to just be like, look, this is how we do it, okay? This works. Trust me, the generation before us had a lot wrong with church, and millennials came in and we introduced a lot of good, and we corrected a lot of the previous mistakes. You're welcome. So if you think that now you're about to critique the mistakes we made, you have got another thing coming.
Well, hey, if you are feeling disoriented in this wilderness, this is the perfect part in this conversation to like get practical and talk about maybe some values to help guide you through this. Once you name this and realize, oh, this is happening, how do I navigate this? We've got some values for you.
Right. It's not just good enough to go, okay, I'm listening to Braden and Alex. What they're saying makes sense. This is concerning. I've had to pull over on the side of the road. Big idea number 4. We need values to help us navigate this new era. So I've got 3 here that I've written for me. If you feel like they apply to you, great. Don't feel like you have to take these on for yourself. For me, value number 1, I never want to stop learning or adapting. There's a difference between being the person that is like, hello, fellow kids, and the person who's wearing clothes from like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think like I want to like strike the middle ground where I don't want to wear skin tight jeans for the rest of my life.
Sure.
Because that's what I wore when I was 18. I also don't feel compelled to like get the hair that like comes over the forehead, because that's what Gen Z is doing like that. So I never want to stop learning or adopting, but to be clear, that does not mean that I'm like a culture vulture for something that is not mine.
Sure.
It's like I can appreciate the culture, I can learn from it, and I don't want to be closed off to it. And I want to like realize about myself that as I get older, pushing myself to embrace things that are different, that I've been previously closed off to, is going to be a lot more challenging than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
And this leads into value number 2, which is that nostalgia is a lie. And I think the best way to illustrate this is that it does not matter what type of music is popular when you are 13 through 21. By the time you hit your 30s, you will say, they don't make music like that anymore.
Yeah.
And if we are just being honest, and we go back to the music that was topping the charts when Kesha and Pitbull and Rihanna were around, it's like, okay, Rihanna made some good music. What was Pitbull doing there? And then you hear like Pitbull come on, you're like, no, but this verse though, they don't make music like this anymore. And look, we made fun of Pitbull in the moment, and yet like it comes on and we're like, Dale.
Yeah.
Yes. Because what happens is the things in creative culture that are taking place during your formative years,
it. Yeah.
and they've done studies on this. So this is not like just like something
I tried to find one because there was one I read last year that pointed at the age 17, which is like they narrowed it down, which is like,
wow,
it's that year when you look back and it's like, yep, they don't make music like this anymore. And it's a false equivalency, right? It's just like, no, these are your most formative years. And the nostalgia is emotive, and in ways that other experiences you have as you get older aren't. And so I tried to find, I couldn't, but to cite it properly. But you're right, this has been thoroughly studied, and it's just a sociological thing that we navigate. And to what I said earlier, like if we can notice it and name it, then we can acknowledge it for what it is, nostalgia, but also acknowledge that it's not objectively true that Fall Out Boy is the best music to have ever been written and or performed.
That being said, could the white boys get back to making some music like that?
Seriously.
Value number 1, I never want to stop learning or adapting. Value 2, nostalgia is a lie, which leads to value number 3. I will overvalue what is familiar and comfortable. You have to understand the default state that you're coming from.
Yeah.
We all believe that we have a sober perspective on the world in front of us. And a lot of the times that we do. But in creative culture, recognizing that when you were 17 is what you will always think was the best, irrespective of its objective qualities or merit, means that you probably will never see some things like this with a sober mind. Yeah. You will always think, slim fit? That seems better than baggy fit. And it doesn't matter about what's true or not. You need to understand your own predisposition. And if you know that you're going to come at any creative thing with that predisposition, then you can know, okay, I need to basically recalibrate every feeling that I have about this in light of the fact that I'm probably not seeing it soberly. It's like if you have a scale at home that you know is like 5 pounds lighter or 5 pounds heavier. You see it and you adjust in your mind.
Yeah.
Or if you see that clock that's on your stove and you know that it's 4 minutes off from your phone and your phone is objectively the true time, you look and you always know, okay, I got to adjust 5 minutes on that clock. You have to do the same thing if every time you come to a creative thing and you go, that's normal. So don't feel like, there's something wrong with me. You just have to recalibrate your perspective.
Totally. Acknowledging that the bias exists and then adjusting for the bias. And this translates, into so many different expressions of creative ministry, whether it's what you choose to do with your church website, which we all know is your virtual front door. More folks are walking through your virtual front door to check out your church for the first time than ever will walk through your physical doors for the first time. They're going to have an experience with you online first. So whether it's what you do with your website or your social accounts, your Instagram account, what have you, it's all of these creative expressions that are telling the story of who your church is and what you believe about the story of Jesus Christ. And so as leaders who are aging in our positions, some folks listening to the show are graduating from executive roles into senior roles. And so still maintaining a role, but we're growing and evolving. We're getting older, frankly. We have knee pain now. We have back pain, chronic back pain. It's so chronic.
That's you?
Yeah.
And mine's the knee?
Yes. Just acknowledge the bias that exists and compensate for it as we move along.
Yeah, I don't know if you took up smoking, but you don't sound right.
I don't know what's going on with me. My kids are just, my kids have been sick all winter, and I just get the edges of their sickness. So I'm functional. My vocal cords are not performing for me today.
It's so curious because you have had the winter of sickness in 25 that our family had in 24.
And last year we were just laughing at everybody.
Yeah. And this year we were laughing at you. Yeah. So my hope is next year, both of us are laughing at others.
Right. Or, to the spirit of this episode, we're not on either end of the spectrum, but we settle right into the middle.
So some sickness, but not all the sickness.
So it's not all the way wide leg or skin tight. It's the fit that you and I prefer, which is just these are straight jeans. There's room to move, but
now
we're not swimming in here.
Now we're just straight fit. Now we're just the vanilla. There's nothing.
Dad cut. Oh, Lord. We got one more big idea.
Big idea number 5. You mentioned web design. And I've been having this feeling I wonder if the photos we should be using on our websites, these big photo containers.
Oh my God, I had this exact idea.
Right. Then the question comes wait a minute. Why are we doing everything that Gen Z wants?
Right.
And that is the important question to interrogate. And that underpins this entire conversation, which is, okay, this generation drives creative trends. So what? Why are we catering to their creative preferences? Yeah. Aside from the fact that we see everything else in the world driven by the young people, does that mean that we should only cater to our own preferences? Because surely we didn't care for things when it was boomers that were purely in senior leadership.
Sure.
And they had very creative differences than us. We're like, okay, but like, can we just play a song from like before or like after 2000? Like Mighty to Save Again? Like, I get it. Like run it, but Darlene check. I mean, come on, something. Like, can we do it differently?
She doesn't even go to that church anymore.
So honestly, and we didn't care for that. So like, I think we would have agreed that like, no, like we have preferences too. Like we should care about those. It would be completely like counterintuitive to then say like, well, now that we're in charge, our creative preferences are still the most important. And so then we get down to, okay, how do you value one generation over another? And at its best, as we often say, church is a unique institution because it's where every generation is meant to gather. That is very unique in culture. It is unusual these days. The church still maintains its spot as one of the few institutions where that exists. And so what we're not saying is like only cater to young people. But what we also know from our conversation with the folks at Growing Young in a previous episode, from their really like landmark research, is that the best way for your church to grow is to disproportionately put resources towards young people. I'm not saying you need to do that in ministry as a whole, but when it comes to creative culture, young people are the tastemakers. And so if you want to stay relevant within creativity, you're going to probably always have to skew towards young people. And that is Gen Z now. And then in 15 more years, when we run back this podcast, because this podcast will never end, it's already been around for 10 years. Everything we've said 10 years ago has like since changed. We'll be saying Gen Alpha, your kids and my kids, they're the ones driving creative culture. And now we'll be 2 generations away. We'll have to spend twice as long on this episode because we'll be like, man, we thought Gen Z was on something different. What are they even proposing? Gen Alpha is crazy. And so our missional value here is that the best way to grow a church is to disproportionately prioritize resources to young people. Disproportionate. That means you have to choose. I mean, we can try to spread it evenly across like every generation. I don't know if that's realistic. What typically happens is the leadership disproportionately prioritizes resources for people that look like them. So let's not pretend that like we're going to choose young people and that that's like some error because we're not doing that currently. No, what's probably happening currently is, you know, your vibe attracts your tribe and the congregation looks and has the same personality as the lead pastor. That's how things go organically. That's the default. To be most effective, and we always say mission over method, the research would suggest in the churches that are growing that the one commonality, and you can go back to that episode if you find it unconvincing, you can read through that book and see all the research yourself if you find it unconvincing, it's actually better to move those resources to the younger people. And that overall betters everyone in the church and the organization as a whole.
That conversation we had with Dr. Kara Powell like really marked me. That phrase about disproportionately prioritizing young people has become like shared language in our church. You know, a rural church of 65 or 75 people who are asking the same questions of a lot of churches in America, frankly, of the average size of like, okay, what now? What next? And so it's just become shared language, and we've begun to do that. And one practical way to make it make sense to the decision makers at your church, your leadership as a whole, is to involve people of that age group. Like, give them a seat at the table.
It's so much easier to make sense of it than listening to us,
right? Like
just talk to them.
Yes, and so like I'm not saying that they need to have a seat at the elders table, but they certainly need to have seats at the table of like leadership meetings. And we try to and not perfectly, but we try to like have someone representative from every decade in our like leadership conversations at church, so that we're spanning the whole. But it's that younger demographic that often gets overlooked because they don't know anything yet. They're just kids, this, that, and the other. But if Dr. Kara Powell and her team at the Fuller Youth Institute are correct and the you know what they've gleaned from the data is true, then we ought to be listening to these kids, even in their youth, even in their struggling and they're grumbling and they're growing, and prioritize them accordingly to see our churches and communities as a whole thrive and hopefully grow.
Yeah, and it's scriptural, right? I mean, I think we were probably the generation that was like, it says in the Bible, Paul wrote it, like, don't neglect me because I'm young. Don't look down at me because I'm young. And now we're like, I mean, look at this kid. Why don't we listen to what he has to say? I want to listen to what she has to say. And I think overall, recognizing that this is challenging is the most important thing. We're not suggesting that you listen to one episode and suddenly you have it all right. But those are the big 5 ideas. Those are the values that we are going to use. And that is this episode of the Pro Church Tool Show. We'll see you next Wednesday. Who knows what brutal truths we'll be sharing then. Talk to you next week.
We got 5 big ideas. We got 3 sneaky values. We got a podcast.
Sneaky values.
You snuck them in there. You snuck them into a big idea.
Yeah, that's true.
Subheading.
Yeah, that's true. I did. I really did.